Sunday afternoon, the weather's miserable, I've got a cold, the bear's won, got a cup of hot coffee, perfect time to work on a radio. So I'm starting at the bottom, I'm going to work my way up. So there's power supply stuff down here. Somebody had tacked in an electrolytic capacitor, Brown Badger 8 microfarad, from here, which is ground, to this terminal strip up here, which is one side of which is going to the filter choke. I'm curious as to which side of the filter choke that is. Did they put it in place of the original 1.3 or is it in place of the 16? Putting it in an 8 here would be a pretty heavy load. So when you turn the set on, the rectifier starts conducting pretty quickly, and it would see that as a dead short. It's a little bit of stress to put on that rectifier, which is why they use a small cap in the first place. Much better to use a smaller cap here, and one that can take a lot of abuse. That's why I want to try to find a better cap than the one that I picked up. And then this filter choke acts as a high impedance when you first turn the set on, so you can put larger capacitors here, and it won't stress out the transformer or the rectifier tube. So we can see which side of the filter choke that is pretty easily. If I put multimeter on that tie point and then go over to the rectifier tube socket, let's see how much resistance we've got. 141 ohms, so that's downstream of that filter choke. So they put that cap on the other side, which is a good thing. Now what I want to figure out is, where is the wire, this wire going to the other side of the filter choke? Somebody had cut this wire and spliced it back in, and it goes off up there somewhere. Well, that's where I want to put in my new cap, which will go inside that box that used to be up here where the hole is. So I'm guessing there should be some clipped off wire going somewhere up here that used to go into that cap. That wire goes off into a wiring harness, so it's a little hard to tell exactly where it's going, somewhere up here. So I'll check for resistance readings and see if I can track it down. So let's see here, I'll clip that on, and maybe it's this wire right here. Nope. Well, I'll keep checking and I'll figure it out eventually. I want to replace this guy, which is held in this end, which is a rivet, and an insulating washer, which I think is probably asbestos, so I want to be careful with that and get that out of there. And the other end's riveted, but there seems to be a screw. I think there's a sheet metal screw going on the other side of this chassis, and if I take that out, disconnect these components, I can take this whole thing out and then mount the new ones in and hook them up. And I also want to start trying to figure out where the IF transformers are. I can see from the parts placement diagram there's one down in here. Around this guy. And I can see that there's a hole in the chassis. There's a can on the other side and there's some wires coming out. I want to trace those down. See if I can check for continuity. It's not so easy though. Not so easy with these wiring harnesses. I decided to go ahead and drill out that rivet and remove that asbestos washer. That left me a hole so I could run a new screw down through there to support these resistors. Unfortunately, the longest screw I had on hand wasn't quite long enough, but I think you get the idea. Get a screw long enough to reach through, thread it through that hole, and put a nut on the end, and it'll hold everything secure. Now I'm moving up this way, slowly identifying more components. This one had me puzzled for a while. It's a coil with just 2 lugs on it. Well, I eventually figured out by tracing out the wiring, and it's going to the band switch. And it's actually this coil right here that must switch in or out that inductor to be in parallel with this one to alter either the local oscillator or bandpass filter action on that 6A7. Probably a local oscillator it's altering. This guy, which had been covered up by this cover, is the antenna transformer. I figured that out because there's a wire going off of it to the antenna terminal. So that's the one right here at the very edge of the paper. Another one I was able to identify from the top of the chassis because it's got a wire coming out of it going to the cap on the 6A7, which means it has to be that transformer. Also written down the pin numbers on these tubes. And the resistors are very handy. They're very colorful, very easy to read. The values, for example, this is blue, brown, black, 600 ohms. And I can see it's going to pins 4 and 5. So it's got to be that guy. As I replace these components, I'm going to highlight them on the schematic to help keep track of things. I've measured a few of these resistors. They're all way off. For example, this 20K measures 32K, so I think I will end up replacing all of them. And so far, I've had continuity on all the coils and transformers. I discovered there's a 100K resistor lurking on the side of this transformer, and it's way off, so I'm going to have to replace it. It's measuring 245K. So that's going to be a little tricky because I do not want to nick that antenna coil and see the resistors right up against the former and kind of embedded in wax. I'll carefully cut one end and try to pry it away. The other end goes into this guy, and there's two wires coming out of this. The other one goes into another transformer down there, which also I suspect has one of these resistors inside. And what this is a dual capacitor. So here's that 100K resistor, they call it 0.1 meg, same thing. And there's C3, that's that capacitor. And if we look over here, we also have 0.1 meg and 0.01 microfarad. I think that's the other side of that capacitor. So C8 and C3 are actually dual caps inside of that metal tube. So I also want to clip these two wires, unscrew the end of this and get it out and try to restuff it if possible. Okay, let's see what's underneath this cover. There's a coil. Now there's a resistor. There's a mica cap, which I'm also going to replace while I've got this open. And I'll also clean up this can when I get it out. Just going to use a damp paper towel. Don't want to use any harsh cleaning products because it may harm the paint. Alright, and let's see. So, what value is that resistor supposed to be? Body and dots. Brown, black, orange. Yeah, that should be 100K, alright. So, let's see. It actually measures 222. Alright, not as high as I measured below, so I might have been measuring it at the right points, but certainly it's more than double the value it's supposed to be, so that will go. I'll try to get in there and read the value on the mica cap. Looks like red and green, so maybe it's 250 picofarad. Let's see, so I'm thinking I'm down in here. It says 2.5. Could that be what that is? 2.5 picofarad. That's an awfully small value. Awfully small. Well, I'm gonna do a little experiment on that. So small, I don't think they could actually manufacture a cap that small back then. Maybe that's supposed to be 25 picofarad. That's a little more believable. I located yet another version of the schematic and printed it out. Instead of what appears to be 2.5 microfarad, this shows 0.000025 microfarad, which I'm pretty sure translates to 25 picofarad. Which makes more sense, because 2.5 picofarad is an extremely small value, and I've never encountered anything that small except for either trimmer caps or later tubular ceramic. Regardless, I'm going to play it safe and leave that mica cap in there. If there are problems with the radio, can go back and maybe take a second look at it. So I went ahead and replaced the 100K resistor down here. And I popped open the shell on the one next to it and found a resistor in there that at first I thought was 500K with body and dot. I thought that that was green, black, and yellow. And comparing it to the 100K, they look pretty similar, but this is actually orange. After checking and double checking the schematic, this is a 50K. And when measured on my ohm meter, it was about 150K. Resistors rarely drift down. They much more commonly drift up, so it makes more sense that a 50K would drift up to 150K rather than a 500K drifting down to 150. So I'm going to go ahead and replace that guy as well. Put the covers back on, which leaves two other transformers top side. I might as well take a look at those too while I've got this out. These are a little different though. They have little hex nuts on top, which I'm assuming are supporting some type of structure inside. So I'm going to be extra cautious when I pop these off. Not quite what I expected. Alright, ceramic form on top, or ceramic plate, and the components are underneath. And there's the transformer mounted at a right angle. Yeah, and there's a resistor buried down in there. That's going to be a little fun to get at. And there you see the trimmer caps. Looks like a metal plate that's bent a bit, and I presume I think there's a mica sheet in there. So you tighten these down and it just moves this metal piece closer or further away from the metal plate underneath that ceramic. So very careful to get at that resistor. So as I've been going through these replacement resistors, I've been checking the transformer coils too, and they've all been good. I was having trouble tracing the wiring underneath. Well, with them exposed up top, I can simply just go right in there and measure the windings directly. I managed to replace that resistor down inside there. And we have continuity in all the windings. This last one does not have any components inside, just the coil, so we'll leave that alone. While I've got these covers off, I've been cleaning them up. A little isopropyl alcohol and then some car wax. So these are ready to be reinstalled. Also cleaned off the remains of the tar that was around here. And look at this finish on this. Kind of crystalline, kind of crazy looking, and it appears to be copper plated steel, so I don't know if this is from the copper plating process that made it look kind of crystalline, or if that's the paint that's on there, but certainly an interesting effect. Something else I got, one of my YouTube viewers sent me not only a higher resolution version of this rider service info, but he also blew it up. So I have it on a number of large sheets all stitched together. I can definitely see more detail now to confirm things that I was just speculating at as to how these coils are wired up, for example. I can definitely see that there was a 0.1. It's weird, for some of these they show like 0.1 and an ohm symbol that's kind of elevated like a superscript, and that means mega ohms apparently, so that's 0.1 mega ohms or 100K, and I can see that that's 300 ohms. Before those were just blurs, and you can easily see the larger ones, 20,000 ohms right there, and you can see exactly, you can see the pin numbers on the tube sockets. And if I'm lucky, I'm going to make out the interior of some of these caps. Like here I can clearly see there are 2.2 microfarad caps inside of that. Here's the multi-suction electrolytic cap. Just kind of make it out. Luckily I can confirm the layout with this one I got from the magazine. Here's one power transformer and line bypass caps, and there's the fuse. What I'm really curious about is, can I make out the details of this? That is the box that's apparently, now I can see it better, it's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 capacitors inside of it. So here's one resistor mounted on it here, one resistor mounted on it here. That looks like a 0.1 mega ohm. And that I think is 20,000 ohms. Oh, and there's a third one here. Can't quite make that one out. And inside here, boy, it's still pretty tough. I think that's a 0.2, maybe that's a 0.3. That's another 0.3. I'm hoping between making out what's printed on here and tracing out how it's wired up, I can figure out each of those component values, and I'll draw this elsewhere. And as I figure those out, so I can also do it by process of elimination. I've got the schematic, and as I identify components one by one, I can cross them off until, you know, whatever's left has to be those final components. And here's the parts placement diagram. Here's that box I've been talking about. There were a number of replacement caps in here that I have clipped out of the way. And I noticed that it appears one of the lugs has been clipped off. Like, I'm pretty sure it's this one. I think this one here. And it had been clipped off and a new cap attached here going to ground. So that's kind of a shame. Let's see about replacing that. I'm pretty sure that's the lug in question, because I can see in the wiring diagram. So one in the upper left there, a lot of wires were going to that point. And I think this also probably had attached down in there originally. Alright, so I want to get these wires out of the way, which I can't really do until I clip these two resistors out. I think the other wiring is still intact, including these two wires, which I think may solve a little puzzle I was wondering about, where there appear to be 8 caps inside but only 6 lugs. Well, if you look on this, there appear to be some wires coming out of it. Like there's one there, BL, that just kind of goes up into some dashed lines inside the box. Similarly, a little hard to see on this blown up page because it got clipped off. You can see it over on here. That's right there. So it looks like a wire just coming out of the side of it. You can see the lugs, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. They're kind of solid black rectangles, but there's one wire coming out here and one wire coming out down here that appear to go to 2 more caps inside. I think that's what these small 2 wires are down here. I'll know better once I clear some of this out. A little bit of heat and a little bit of pulling, and the insides came right out. See, it's still molten there. Fairly low temperature wax, probably beeswax. Smells fairly nice, fairly typical of beeswax. So these wires here are ground, as were the two that I already clipped out. You still can't tell where these two wires are going. So as before, I'll clear out this stuff, clean out the box, try to reuse this plate. I'll have to do something about that clipped off lug, but I think I can come up with something.